Thank you very much, Aaron. I'm away on holiday in the Scottish Highlands in a rather remote place, and so I can't guarantee the internet connection. And there was a time earlier on in this webinar when it all got very garbled when I was here. Of course, you never know whether when it gets garbled, that's you or it's somebody else elsewhere. But if you start having problems hearing, then somebody send me a message and let me know. Can you hear me okay at the moment?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Right, I'll share my slides then. So, as you've gathered, we want to encourage TCM practitioners to write up interesting examples of their cases. All of us talk about cases with varying degrees of seriousness and for varying reasons, but very few write them up for publication. And that goes for me too. So this talk will show you how to do it, or at least help you on that journey. Aaron has set out the reasons why this is important. And you can see that it works equally well for practice, for education, for research. And it's also true that in orthodox medicine, exactly the same sort of reasoning holds, and there's the same sort of support. This is from a journal specifically of medical case reports. So you also saw in one of Aaron's slides, I noticed that it said that they should be well written and they should be in an academic format. Now, what exactly does this mean? Are there rules for writing them? Well, there are experts for everything, and there are experts for this too. There's a whole bunch of experts who make up a kind of nebulous network called the Equator Network. And what they do is try and improve the quality of health research. And in particular, they've produced and gathered together in one place guidelines for a lot of things in research. You can see the collection of them here. If you look down the bottom on the left-hand side, you can see case reports. And their sort of official guideline for case reports is called CARE. I think it was first published in 2013. And obviously the people who produce this guideline like to big up the importance of their guideline. And so they're saying that if you write a case report without some kind of guidance, then it's likely to be pretty rubbish and not able to properly inform practice or research. So what does the CARE guideline look like? It's got there's often with these guidelines there's a checklist. These are the things that you've got to have in your report. So the case report guideline has got 13 items. I'm not showing you all of them. This is just three of them here for illustration. And you can see that it's similar sort of stuff that you'd expect for any kind of medical intervention, including TCM1, except in respect of some of their particular examples there. You can see in brackets, like, so you've got to say something about the diagnostic methods, and they say e.g. PE, that's physical examination, laboratory testing, imaging, questionnaires. Well, we, under diagnostic methods, we probably want to put something different from that. And there are examples of therapeutic interventions. You can see number 9, types of intervention, for example, pharmacological, surgical, preventative self-care. So we might have acupuncture, moxa, herbs, etc. So is such a guideline actually a good fit for TCM cases? Well, as I said, it's written quite generally, so it fits most situations. You could just change over the examples so that they relate to TCM rather than orthodox medicine. And it's because it's so general, it doesn't say anything specific, like about particularities of the TCM diagnosis and treatment, about conceptual framework. It doesn't say anything there. Well, either to say you've got to have it, or you've got to talk about it, or what it might be. So, which raises the question of, there's a general question here of how general or how specific should guidelines be? And if we go on to TCM, acupuncture, herbs, whatever, is there a guideline specifically for this? Now, we know that for acupuncture, the official guideline for randomized controlled trials, Consort, has an extension specifically for acupuncture, stricter. And there are now also extensions for cupping and Chinese herbs. There's no such thing with the case reporting guideline. But there has been a TCM case reporting guideline written in 2016. It's just not one that's officially added on to care. And it was produced by a team based in the university in Hong Kong. There's the leader, Professor Zhao Xiang. And we have a look at one of the items. This guideline, CARC, has got 16 items, a 16-item checklist. This is just one of them here, and it's the one that is about reporting on treatment. And you can see that there, as well as the therapeutic principle, it's got separate sections for reporting on the details of the Chinese herbal intervention, the acupuncture intervention, or the moxibustion intervention. I've not put in the details for B and D just to make the slides simpler, so I've only put in the details for acupuncture. Now you can see that there's a must report and there's a recommended, and it wants you to give details of points that you use, and it wants you to give details of the way in which you do the needling. And this is obviously a lot more specific in what it's asking for than the very general care guideline. Do you actually need to follow guidelines to get published? In fact, you don't need to follow these kind of official guidelines, even though they're out there and various journals might advertise them and recommend them. Generally, they don't actually specify that you need to follow the guidelines. It's much more likely that each journal will ask you to follow its own particular guidance, not care or CARC or whatever. And I've chosen an example here from BMJ case reports, so British Medical Journal case reports. This isn't the British Medical Journal, but it's a kind of offshoot of it, specifically for case reports. And it's apparently, it says, got the world's largest collection with over 7,000 of them. And if we look at the way that they set out their guidance, they provide a template and you have to fit into these headings. So background, case presentation, what investigations, diagnosis, treatment, outcomes, discussion, etc. And this is, again, it's really quite general. And these are the sorts of headings that, you know, if you were an acupuncturist, not knowing anything really about guidelines, and said to yourself, okay, I'm going to sit down and write a case report. How am I going to structure it? What kind of headings am I going to follow? Well, probably these sorts of headings here. And they're the same sorts of headings that we've seen time and time again in case reports that we've read in journals. So why do they give quite straightforward, simple, flexible guidelines. The reason is because they very much want to encourage doctors, your ordinary doctor in the street, to write up and send in a case report. And their whole journal is about publishing case reports. So they want people to send in case reports. Yeah? Now, how does it fit? How does it go when we come to TCM journals? If you look at the instructions for authors with EJOM, the European Journal of Oriental Medicine, it just says to be structured using these headings: introduction, diagnosis, etc. Very similar headings to the ones we've just seen in that BMJ journal. Journal of Chinese Medicine, they publish quite a few case studies. There are no explicit guidelines in their instructions to authors, but in practice, if you look at the nature of the cases that get published there, they're quite similar, again, following those kind of structures that we've just seen above. And it's also worth saying that the JCM for some years now has had a dedicated database of cases. Any structural format is acceptable because, again, they're trying to get you, any practitioner, to write up and send in the case. That's what they want, because they want to put together a resource that's got, for practice, that's got as many cases gathered together as possible. Because the more cases there are, whether you've got lots of cases on one subject or you've got cases across a whole range of subjects, it makes it a much more useful resource for practitioners. This is just an example of a recent case in the Journal of Chinese Medicine. I put it in simply because I'd never come across this disease before, POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. But 1 week before this was published, I had 2 patients turn up who had this illness, which I'd never heard of before. And so seeing a case written up like this, even though I don't tend to look at cases and say, okay, well, I'm going to follow their points or their treatment principles, there's always something useful you can find in it. And for me, with this, it was the stuff about lifestyle advice, because one of the patients, I sent them something about the dietary recommendations that were in this case report. Anyway, that's a kind of side issue, by the by. So the punchline then, you've always got to have a punchline when you write up your case. Yeah, you've got to have, okay, this is the take-home message. The take-home message here, folks, is ETCMA wants your cases. Send us your case reports for publication on the website. So as you've seen, there are various journals that would like your cases. There are other journals that don't particularly publish cases at all. So if you're looking for a home for your case, and it may be that there, as Aram refers to, there are various reasons why you might write up a case, and there are various reasons why you might choose one sort of journal or another, or someone's website or another website. And although we very much want you to send your cases to us, we'd also understand if you had a particular case, I don't know, on POTS, and you wanted to publish it in a whatever the POTS related orthodox medical journal might be, if they take cases. But we are producing our own case reporting guidelines to help you structure your report and to provide some quality standards. It will be simple to follow and flexible. There's still for me the question mark of, to what degree do we make it a more general thing with mainly just headings, categories? To what extent do we put in the details, like in that TCM one you saw? We want to know exactly what the points are, what the rationale for choosing those points is, how long you left the needle in, and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of debate is still there up for question, and we'd appreciate people's input on that. Right, I think that's the end. I say thank you very much for listening. It's now going on to the part of the webinar that you're going to find even more interesting, because it's two people who are going to present their own real life cases. And so I'll hand over to, is it Gil or Anya next?
Yeah, I think it's me.
Okay,